That's cool. All right. What's up, guys? We'll get started here in just a minute. And Scott and I are going to do some live muscle minds. I'm on about 3 hours of sleep right now. Hope you're better rested, Scott.
Not bad, not bad. I had some early appointments this week,
Okay.
so normally I kind of, we schedule to go around this time. There's
Yeah.
Matt, hey brother, and so I can sleep in. It's not a problem making it by 11, but I woke up early because I've been getting up early. So
Yeah.
I put in 2 hours of German chat on a meetup group.
Did you really this morning already?
Yeah, about an hour and 45 minutes. It was very, very cool, very interesting.
Nice.
Yeah. It's
we got
a
a few
pretty
people.
cool group.
Yeah. How long you been in that group now? It's been over a year, hasn't it?
There's a bunch of dude. I'm a member. If someone finds me on there's Matt first two comments. If someone finds me on Meetup, I'm a member of like every German group in the entire U.S. and some in Germany too that speak German or English.
Really?
During the pandemic, yeah, everyone was meeting online. Now most of those either they're defunct or they just meet in person and they don't even do it on Meetup.
Okay.
But this one it shows that it's based in Frankfurt. But
Okay.
the guy who runs it is in the U.S. and there's several Germans on there and a woman from Italy. And I've only been on this group like 2 or 3 times, but they speak English and German, go back and forth. The Germans want to improve their English, and the Americans want to improve their German.
Oh yeah, yeah. That
But we
makes total
flip back
sense.
and we help each other. It's very, very cool.
Phil's with us from the Detroit Metro Airport right now. Safe
Sweet.
travels, man. Safe travels.
He's keeping company while he's waiting.
Health, wealth, and life with Kelvo. He says it's science time.
Yeah, buddy.
We'll give it just a minute here, guys. We'll get a few more people to join us. This was last minute. It wasn't even planned, or else we would have let you guys know that we were going to do this live. But what's the topic today, Scott? It just is a little tease. What are we going to be talking about?
Plateau-Busting. There's a study that came out just last year.
Okay.
That's, it's really, it's going to be up there with one of my top 5 favorite studies, I think, training-related studies of all time, I think.
Oh, nice.
Just that one figure. That's all we need is that one figure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I kind of put in there what happened. It's real basic stuff, like the basic notions that you can take from this as far as trying to plateau bust. Or it's really, really pretty cool. And it's like, it's a type of thing like, thank goodness someone finally did this study, or did a study like this because and showed the individual data points because it's just super, super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Michael Devereaux with us. He's got an incredible home gym. Like I'm talking, he's like one of the best. Like it should be a commercial gym.
Nice.
And
How
I
much
would
square footage? Do you know?
I don't know. Maybe he'll tell us. And tell us how many pieces do you have? Because he has like all the good stuff too, like Prime and Arsenal. I think he has like six Prime machines in this home gym. It's like an outbuilding, like you have. And
okay.
It's all set
nicer
up.
than mine, I'm sure. Probably air conditioned.
I bet it is. Versus you're out there in the heat, right?
You know what I actually did? I finally broke down. I got a fan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And part of it was just, here's what I do. This is going to kind of gross, but like there was a day like last week, I went through 4 sets of clothes because I have, client work, whatever I have to work online. And then I go outside when I've got an hour or something. And in an hour, there won't be a dry spot on my shorts or my shirt. I sweat.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in the barn. There's no air. So then I come back. I'm like, oh, shit, I live out here in the boonies. So I just stripped down on my back porch, and I have clothes that I hang up that have dried out, and they're clothes that were sweated in and dried out.
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
like, I'm not going to go shower every time, so I just throw on a dry set of clothes. And there was one day I went through 4 sets of clothes, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, now I'm totally heat adapted, And the actually little science here, one of the adaptations you look at people who are sweating a lot, and the general perception is, oh man, they're really out of shape. Then it could be that someone's very overweight and they're sweating excessively because they're extra insulated from the adipose, right?
Right.
But a normal adaptation to sweating, to heat acclimation or climatization, depending on how it's done, is to have a greater sweat rate to some degree. And men tend to sweat over excessively. They lose more fluid than is needed for optimal heat loss, and to start sweating earlier. So I sweat like a mofo. I'm a sweating machine, man, big time.
Yeah, me too.
So finally I got a fan. I'm like, at least I can I won't have to. It was just like I come inside. I'm like, I got to change my clothes again because I'm not going to sit on my chair here at my desk. Like there's sweat all over my table. It's like it's just nasty. So I was literally trying to keep myself from having to change my clothes so I could just dry off with the wind of the fan.
Yeah.
And then not have to drink 19 gallons of water every day to stay hydrated.
We'll bring us in here. I'll bring us in here. So Michael Devereaux does this. He says Scott, close to 8 prime. Haha. And yeah, he has AC and heat. So he's got the setup. He's got the setup down there. I think he's in Indiana. So something like that. All right, I'll bring us in. And guys, while you're watching live, feel free to ask questions because we're going to do this little study that Scott has. And then after that, we'll take your listener questions and hang out with you. Oh, here we go. Wait, one more message from Michael because he says 7 Arsenal, 5 Cybex, 3 Hammer Strength, 2 Elite, 3 Jim Lico, and recently new set of metal Intech dumbbells like Hunter Labrada's gym has. That's the setup right there.
Yeah, that's an investment.
We've got a guy watching from Alaska. We've got a guy watching from Seattle. We've got guys from all over the place here. So this will be a fun one.
Did you see that Ronnie Coleman's house was up for sale?
I did. Yeah.
I don't know if someone bought it, but it was like $400,000, I think.
No kidding.
Had the gym in there. Everything was in it. That his gym.
Yeah. Man, imagine buying that. Yeah, but imagine buying his Ronnie's gym, right?
Yeah, you 10 pounds of muscle just living in the house. That's what we're saying.
All right, I'll bring us in here. What's up, guys? Cool. Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally, and all of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You can use our code THINK for additional savings. High-quality, third-party tested supplements, tons of different protein flavors, every type of protein you can think of. So if you can't do whey, then you might be able to do beef or egg or pea protein isolate, True Pea Isolate, which has very little carbs. Check them out. And use our code THINK for additional savings and supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. If you're in Canada, check them out. They've got great deals that change week to week. Also, check this out, Scott, if I can find it real quick here. Oh man, where'd it go? I just had it out the other day. You gave me one of your business cards for BYOBBcoach.com. Yeah, I just had it here there it is. Scott's book. We got this. You gave this to me at the Olympia in 2018, I think it was. BYOBBcoach.com. That's where you can get Scott's book, and you can get the hardcover from Amazon. I'll be sure to put links into all that stuff below after we're done recording here. Scott, you've got a study today that you said is going to be at this point, it's a new study, and it's already in your top 5 favorite studies ever. I think it's going to be.
Yeah. By the way, I need to take one of those cards and put it on my forehead during all podcasts, I think.
Just leave it there? Yeah. I'll just do that for you.
I like that. That's nice. It stays.
Yes, I'm sweaty enough that works.
Yeah. So the question is we've got, and if you look through the responder, non-responder literature, I think that term first kind of came into the common nomenclature of bodybuilding with creatine. Are you a creatine responder? Are you a non-responder? Is it just genetics? Is it your diet? Vegetarians would respond crazy to creatine supplementation because they're not producing any. And then you talk about people are they entirely non-responders, or are they just non-responders to some forms of exercise? So you could be there are people who are non-responders to endurance training. They don't have any increase in maximal oxygen consumption. You have people who are non-responders in terms of strength, but they get some muscle growth, and vice versa. And we're, of course, worried about muscle growth. So the question is, if you're a non-responder in terms of muscle growth, what can you do about that, right? And so that's sort of the real hard gainer situation where someone actually is truly a hard gainer. That term was around 40 years ago when I started training.
Yeah,
hard gainer. It's always been around, and there's truth to it. There really is. We've seen that in some of the other studies that we talked about here. So this is a study where they basically they looked at a phenomenon, which has been one that's been talked about now for quite a long while, looking at gains that come from doing high rep training versus low rep training, right? And as kind of backdrop to this, one of the things that I included in Fortitude Training were different set types. So
Right.
you've got muscle rounds, those are cluster sets. You've got loading sets, which are heavy training, low rep training, and you've got pump sets, which are high rep training, and that also take advantage of things like training at lengthened positions, doing partials at training lengthened positions, or something you can totally do with a pump set. So pump sets were high rep training, and some of these other things you can add in all at once, focusing on the mind muscle connection. So those three big kind of buzzwords all fit in. So in this study, this was with elderly women, postmenopausal women. They had, who can gain muscle. They just train the lower body. And if you want to throw up that figure I sent you in text,
Sure thing.
we can just start with that.
All right.
So,
Whoops. Bring it a little bit bigger. There we go. Something like that.
So what we see here in these two graphs are the results in terms of thigh lean body mass. So it's just in the thigh, the entire thigh. So they did, you can see in the upper right, I kind of broke down the program. They trained 3 times a week for 12 weeks with either a high rep regime or a low load, high rep regime. That's in the upper left. So low load was between like 27 and 31 reps per set. And the high load was 8 to 12. So heavy or light. So basically sort of Widowmaker style or pretty heavy training. And so it was just randomly, and they were training both legs. This is not a one-legged study like some of the other studies have been, which are also very, very cool. And so they worked their way up over the course of the first couple of weeks. Eventually, for the last 10 weeks of the 12-week training period, they were doing 3 sets, the second or third, basically to momentary muscular failure. Once they exceeded the rep range, they would increase the weight.
Okay.
Right. And there's some other interesting data that we can maybe talk about regarding how much they progress and that sort of thing. But I want to kind of keep this simple now because this is a big enough piece, I think, just to cover for today. So what they found, as you almost always find, pretty much everything in nature follows this sort of bell curve phenomenon, that you had some people responded better and some people responded not so well. In both cases, to the high rep regime and the low rep regime, to light training or heavy training.
Mm-hmm.
And what they then did with everyone, so you were either in the high rep or the low rep for the first 12 weeks, and then they switched them over. So they changed regimes, right? So they crossed over to the other. If they were high rep, they went to low rep. If they were low rep, they went to high rep. And so what we see here on the left are 2 data points for each subject. So normally, if I were doing a PowerPoint, I would kind of swipe these. But if you look on the left side there, up above, it says total lean body mass, high responders at 12th week.
Yeah.
So these are ones who made greater than a 3% gain. So you see all those dots on the left side of the left curve are up above 3%.
Yep.
Those were the responders, so to speak, the ones who grew the best. Okay. And then when they switched over, that's the set of points to the right on that leftmost graph. You see, in general, the law of diminishing returns applying here. So if you made really good gains initially, those gains slow down. Yeah. So look at the upper tip top left. There's someone who gained 13% lean body mass, right?
Yeah. Wow.
And they were in they were in a high rep because it's a filled in black dot, not a gray dot.
Okay, so the gray dot is the low reps, which I see. Yep. Okay, the key in the upper right hand corner there.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Low reps to high reps.
Upper black, it's kind of the dot's kind of cut off. It was like that in the picture when I copied. But that person made great gains on the high rep, and then they slowed when they switched to low rep. So they were 13+% increase, and then they were just above 3%. So they were still a good responder, but nothing like before. Now, if we scroll down to the next highest point on the left of the leftmost graph, that's a low. There's 2 people who are kind of clustered there together. Yeah. There's 2 low load to high load data points there. So they made like 10.5 and a little over 11%. And the one person, basically, if you follow their data point, low load to high load, they didn't make any gains. It was like 0.5%, right? Okay. There's another person, the one who did really, really well, 10.5% when they started with low load. When they went to high load, they actually lost size. They lost muscle mass. Right? So, like, the first thing there is one lesson that could be taken from those folks is they were doing really, really well, and then they program hopped, so to speak. They changed from, in one case, from a high load to low load, in the other two cases from low to high load, and they didn't do as well. So that can be law of diminishing returns. I suspect that may have been at play, for instance, with the highest responder, that high load to low load at the very tip top, who went from 13 down to 3. But for instance, that person who went from 10.5, the third down there, who went from low load to high load, they made gains initially, and when they switched to high load, they lost size. Right?
Yeah.
So you don't know where you're going to be, right? So these are but those, everyone in that left group are all the high responders. Those are all ones who did really, really well.
Okay.
And overall, if you average them out, there's a couple that ended up, close to zero. Like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, it's about 5. Averaged out, they still made some gains in the second half. So those second sets of data points are still on the plus side on average, but it's huge variability.
When you say the second set of data points, which ones are you talking about there?
To the right on the leftmost graph. So
we're still on the left graph,
responder side,
and you're looking at the right side of that. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, so
what's up?
Go ahead.
What's up with that? Let's see. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one down that went from low load to high load. Oh my God! They're the only person you can see if you count, guys. That fifth one down, it's the only person going the other direction. That's
what I was going to say next. Yes, thanks for the segue. So that person, they did pretty dang well. They were over 6%. They were better than all but 4. They're pretty much equivalent to that fourth person, with, in their case, low load initially, and then when they switched to high load, that was the money right there, baby. That's when they started. So they probably, on average, I think they ended up pretty close to being as good as anyone. Maybe that super high outlier at the very tip top, the first 12 weeks, drop down. If you average those two together, they might have been close to about the same percentage increase.
Wow, that's wild.
So it's like that's the thing. If you look at these individual data points, you see what personal trainers see. You see why we have so many people that say HIT is the way to go, and some people say volume training is the way to go. Yeah. Because it's both are true. Depending on the person. High reps are the way to go. Low reps are the way to go.
Yeah.
Both are true, depending on the person, right? So, like, just those data points are just phenomenal. You look at them,
Yeah. Yeah.
But we know, of course, we're expecting to see lower values in that second 12-week period because of the law of diminishing returns. You take off. Initially, you grow better when you start. And then as you continue along, even if you didn't change your program, you're expecting that you're not going to gain at the same rate as you did initially.
Yeah.
If you're unless you add in, something crazy, or you change your stimulus. So the interesting thing they could have done, this could be another study, is, and they didn't do this, is leave those individuals for the next 12 weeks with the same rep range.
Okay.
So leave some, leave some with low reps for the second 12 weeks, leave some with high reps. You only have so many subjects, so they can't do every combination.
Yeah.
But that would be interesting to see, because we have a law of diminishing returns here, which means, as I said, you'd expect lesser gains the second 12 weeks than the first 12 weeks. But it makes me wonder, when we're going to look at this next graph, if that law of diminishing returns, that reduced return on investment in those second 12 weeks was somewhat offset by having changed their program, at least for some people. Now, that person that you mentioned, that was not the case. They did better in the second 12 weeks when they changed from low load to high load. So we know that was the case. For some people... Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I'll bring this back up. So since you're somebody who, when you've been in school, you've done a bunch of studies yourself, there's going to be some factors that you can't quite account for, right? Because everybody's individual. Now, how often is it that, is it possible? And I'm just saying, I'm looking for how something could possibly affect things that we aren't seeing here. Is it possible that person who had that that dramatic change, maybe they got more plugged in and they started eating better, or like, because that obviously would make a difference. Or are they told in situations like this generally, like, keep doing everything you do at home, don't change your diet, stuff like that? How does that usually go in a study?
They're told to do that, but even if you do dietary recall with people, those are notoriously poor.
Okay.
People don't do a very good job. Like when they have people, they've done studies where they take pictures, and then have them, which does help to get people to report more accurately. But people are notoriously bad about that. So, like I remember seeing a study once where it was way back in the creatine days, and it was a guy who was presenting before people really kind of knew that this was the 90s, that creatine was something that could potentially be helpful. And he had a subject who, when he got in the study, decided that he was going to eat a bunch of steak.
Okay.
Whatever. And he started eating like massive amounts of steak.
Yeah.
So he got a lot more creatine, of course, a lot more protein too. And this guy was the extreme responder in his study. So he mentioned that. I had a guy in my study, and he told me this afterwards. And it's one of those things, like, he revealed it to me, but I don't know that everyone else didn't do that too. Who knows?
Yeah.
These things you can't always get. You just can't gather all that info. But when he started the study, and this guy he so loved bodybuilding. He came in and I'm like, dude, we got to get you on here and get you training, because he would just ask me questions for hours. Really.
Okay. Yeah.
But he went to started going to Smoothie King, and every day he was drinking like a Hulk, like the biggest one they have, with like 3 extra protein shakes.
Yeah.
And he was the greatest. He grew in both legs, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, you weren't supposed to do that. He told me about it afterwards. He came in, like, one time he's like, okay, I mean, nothing to do about it. You do your best, but there's these uncontrollable factors.
Okay. I was just wondering how that was dealt with in studies in general. And that makes sense, man, because I'll tell you what, when I start exercising, I get into it. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that the exercise is where everything starts for most people. We don't all wake up and be like, hey, you know what? I want to be a bodybuilder, so I'm going to start eating chicken 6 times a day. What do? You're like, I want to be a bodybuilder. I want to look good. So you go in the gym and you start lifting weights, and then it kind of snowballs from there. So I'll blow the graph back up here for you.
No, we can talk about this for a while, because it's important. Like, it happens with general health behaviors. People stop smoking, and then they take on other health behaviors along with that.
Yes.
Because there's a cognitive dissonance with, I stopping smoking, I'm paying attention to my health. If I'm going to keep that going, I'm not going to just keep eating McDonald's.
Yeah.
I'm going to go all in to some degree, so that there's continuity in my thought process throughout the day.
Yeah.
I'm not like, I don't stop smoking and just keep drinking like a fiend.
Yeah.
Right? People tend to do all those things coherently, all at once to some degree. So yeah. The other thing that is a very strong possibility is some people just like to train heavy. Some people like training lighter, and that's bodybuilders, they like that because maybe they grow better that way or what have you. But there's a different kind of perception of effort with high rep versus low rep training.
Yeah.
So that person might have gone, like the one who did better in the second 12 weeks.
Yeah.
They went from low load to high load. It may have been like, wow, I'm so glad that I don't have to do these 30 rep sets anymore. This is so much easier. I'm going to I can handle this. I'll just go to town. They're doing leg presses, knee extensions, leg presses, hamstring curls, and calf presses. It's when we show the graph, it's in the upper right.
Okay.
They're doing 30 rep sets of leg presses.
Dang.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
It's really brutal. The second and the third were to failure, right?
Okay.
When they were eating the rep ranges, they would stay in the rep range the first one, and the next two they were going to go to failure when they were getting beyond 30. So they're like, people were probably getting 35. Those are rough,
Oh,
so it's a total psychological relief. Their training motivation will definitely vary depending on the person, whether you're high rep or low rep, low load or high load.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's one of the factors. This is not just purely a physiological phenomenon that the muscle grows necessarily better because of the rep range per se. It can very much be a psychological phenomenon, thus a neurological in terms of your effort levels, and the stimulus varies in terms of effective reps, how close to failure you're willing to go. Like, you got 5 reps that are just brutal when you're doing a 30 rep set. If you're going to true failure where the weight stops moving, how you don't normally see that on a high rep set, where literally someone just keeps grinding until literally the weight just starts to come back and okay, they're done. But you can do that on a set of 9 or 10, right?
Right.
And I'm done. That's it.
Yeah, you hit failure so much faster.
Yeah.
And I've told people that I see people that they're going to failure and they're only doing like 6 or 7 reps, guys that need to work on their intensity. And I've said, hey, why don't we take this to 10 reps? Because if they're failing at 5, you get that 4th rep, and when you fail on 5, you're just buried. It's just, okay, I'm done, because you literally can't get any more. Yeah. But if you fail at 12, now like rep 7's getting harder, 8's getting even harder, 9 is really hard, 10 is even harder than that, but you still can keep grinding through them. You're not just like buried by the overload of it all,
Yeah. It's like you're going to pull the Band-Aid off slowly, or you're going to rip it off.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that. So yeah, all those things, that's a great question. All those things apply. We don't know exactly what was going on mechanistically in terms of why on an individual basis things were different in the first half versus the second half for these different individuals.
Yeah.
But we do see these things that it varies. We see probably law of diminishing returns. We see variable responses to high reps versus low reps. And overall, because now we've just looked at the quote unquote responders, or the high responders versus the low responders, that we have that phenomenon as well. So let's go back, and now we'll look at the right graph on the right side.
All right.
So yeah. Oh, yeah. You see my ugly. Yeah, that's perfect actually, because you can still read it. That's as big as it gets. So if you look on this right side graph, here we see on the leftmost points, those are the pre to 12th week. So the first 12 weeks of training. We have the same situation where some people were high load to low load, others were low to high load, but those are all the low responders. So you see all of those points are below 3% change in thigh lean body mass. So there's one person who's like right at 0. Okay. That's a high load to low load person. That person is basically your non-responder. Yeah. They didn't make any gains initially with high load, and they switched to low load, and they still didn't make any gains. So that's just like, okay, you lost the lottery, man. Like you're just completely SOL, right? But here's the cool thing. Look at what happened to everybody else. All the low responders, except for that one exception. This is what's kind of cool, because there's always an exception to the rule, and that's we see one there. They had enough subjects so you could see that visibly when you plotted them all out. Yeah. Everyone else went from low to high, and most of them were above that 3% cutoff. So everyone, when they switched to either high load to low load or low load to high load, it's mixed pretty evenly. It wasn't like, going from high load to low load produces better gains necessarily. It was low load to high load or high load to low load. It didn't matter. When they switched, these quote-unquote low responders, non-responders, the vast majority of them, all but one in this particular study, made better gains during the next 12 weeks of training. That goes against this law of diminishing returns. Yeah. So what this tells us, and this is what's so cool for the quote-unquote the hard gainers, the non-responders, is that look for something. If you're not making good gains and you've got all your I's dotted, your T's crossed, you're not program hopping saying, that wasn't good enough. If it's still working, keep at it. Like don't fix something that's not broken. Yeah. Right. You'll end up like what typically you might see what happened in the leftmost graph is not, with the exception of one person, everyone made lesser gains to some degree. It was highly variable. Changing. So keep with it to some degree is sort of the first rule of thumb. Okay. But in this case, they changed fairly dramatically from 30 reps to about 10 reps on average. There's a substantial change in load. They were using like 30% or 80%. Okay. That's a dramatic change. So you wouldn't expect this phenomenon to happen if you're going from 8 reps to 12 reps necessarily. Okay. There's value in that if, for instance, like once you get below 10 reps, your joints start to really bother you, what have you. But this case, what we saw is that all these low responders, with the one exception, did better the next 12 weeks of training. And the majority of them, it looks like, if I count the numbers here, meaning more than half of them actually ended up above that low responder cutoff, that low high responder cutoff of 3% in this particular study. So the low responders, many of them became high responders, and all but one became responders to some degree.
Okay.
And two of them, look on the left, again, the rightmost graph here, there are two of them that were at low load, in this case, that were technically negative. I mean, they're so close to zero, like the ones at 1.5%. So that was probably, some loss there. But those both ended up at 2 or 3%. So they at least made some gain.
Yeah.
It didn't turn them into hyper responders. But we do have a couple people there who were at 3%. They were just below that low, high load cutoff.
Mm-hmm.
Look, they were just below 3%, and they ended up around 9%.
Yeah.
And in this case, interestingly enough, like these data are like really kind of nice. One of those was a high load to low load, and the other was a low load to high load.
So,
Right?
what you're saying is that it's not as much the load as much as just sticking with it.
Well, in this case, these were generally low responders,
Right.
and they looked to do something different, to make a change.
Okay.
And those two individuals I just mentioned, they went from low responders to high responders, but it wasn't that happens when you go from low load to high load, because one of them went from low load to high load, and the other went from high load to low load.
So it was just making the change itself.
It was just making the change. So the big picture message there is a low responder, and this is 12. This wasn't like a 4-week study. This is what's kind of nice. These weren't 4-week periods. They went for 12 weeks. That's a solid 3 months, right?
Yeah.
And then they switched over, and we see that all the low responders, with the one exception, became responders, and many of them, quote unquote, high responders for the definition of this particular study, when they switched to a substantially different program, which we know is effective for muscle growth. They didn't say, I'm going to do 100 rep sets, right?
Yeah.
Which could be effective too. They went from high load to low load, or low load to high load. And we know, from numerous studies now, this being one of them, on average, the gains for low load and high load were the same.
Yeah.
Right? The averages were the same. But what we did was made low responders into responders by switching, making a substantial shift, in this case, in the rep range and the training loads that were used, the relative training loads. And I think that's just awesome. That's just like, if you're pretty sure, I'm not making the gains that I would like to be making, that maybe the average person would, and after 12 weeks, that's pretty, that's a solid period of time. That's I think, considerable. It's like, okay, let's try something different.
Yeah.
Train hard. They kept the number of sets the same, so the volume can change a little bit because your workload changes when you go from heavier to lighter, like that, or vice versa. But they kept everything the same, and they changed one variable, the load. They kept going to failure in the second and third set. So all they did was change that one thing, same exercises, nothing else changed. They didn't completely okay, let's do everything different now. New exercise, everything else.
Yeah.
They did this very systematically, which is what you do in studies, so you can isolate, to the extent possible, the condition that led to the results that they found. We don't know to what extent it was like that these people did. They liked training in a different way, but I would say that because we don't have any clear pattern, that people who switched from low load to high load did better. That wasn't the case. It went both directions. It was simply something about changing the stimulus. In this case, we can kind of say something about changing the nature of the training led to something that defied this law of diminishing returns and produced adaptation in those who previously hadn't had adaptation, to the extent that one would hope. They were the bottom half of the barrel. They were the left side of the bell curve, below the 50th percentile. So I think this is just like awesome. This is really, really cool to see this delineated. And the reason I say that so much with such enthusiasm is the point that I mentioned many times, I think on this podcast and other podcasts, is that the goal of studies where you're looking at means and standard deviations and group averages is to determine whether, if you see a statistical difference between two groups, whether you can generalize that to the public. So if you see strong enough difference statistically, analysis of variance, or however you choose to do this, that means, we can typically expect in most everyone this is gonna happen.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And what matters to you, the individual, or the personal trainers who's trying to take this information, isn't necessarily what happens to the average person. or someone else. It's what would happen to you.
Hmm.
And when you do studies like this that plot the individual data and see the individual responses, we see that the variability on an individual basis is so large that generalizing to say that high reps and low reps produce the same muscle growth, like that's what you can say. That's the conclusion from numerous studies comparing low and high load. You read that. I could probably go and pull the abstracts, and that's what you're going to find. But you look at these data and you say, for those people who made better gains the second 12 weeks in this study, when they went from low load to high load or high load, low load, it absolutely made a heck of a difference which way they trained.
Yeah.
Tremendously. So that's an untruth for the individual to say that those two things are equivalent stimuli, because they're not. It's context dependent, and it's dependent upon the individual.
Yeah.
So this is just really, really phenomenal. This is science that I think is more directly applicable to the trainer who wants to know, like, okay, I got these people who just aren't growing and I want to keep them as clients and I want them to progress.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? It's like, okay, well, let's change it up. We'll keep everything the same. We'll just change this, and boom, what happens? So
I would say that, and like you said too, 12 weeks is a really good amount of time if you're not seeing progress in 12 weeks. So we could take this and apply it to, let's take a guy who's watching right now, and for the last year, we'll even say, because a lot of times we go longer than 12 weeks and we just keep doing what we've always done. We've always trained 8 to 12, right? That's like what people generally do. You know, are you saying then that something for him might be not even change the split, but just change that rep range for, the next 12 weeks and see if that does anything?
Yeah, absolutely. You'd have to be in a practical world. I mean, they went for 12 weeks. I think we don't know, for instance, they made measurements before and after.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a phenomenon. There's studies that have looked at this where you start making gains, and then if you keep going, you literally can go into an overtraining phase where, let's say you made a 10% gain, you peaked at 10% above your baseline, 8 weeks in, and then after that you started overtraining. Those last 4 weeks you actually lost 4%. So instead of being at 10%, now you're at 6%. So it's smart to auto-regulate to some degree. In this case, for some individuals, if they just simply swap set for set, going with the higher reps, they may find their nervous system is just like, oh, okay, this is too much.
Yeah.
So they may need to go from 3 sets down to 2, just because you want to apply the rule and have some systematic control over it, I think, because you change everything up and then you don't know what worked.
Yeah.
But you also want to use common sense and say, okay, I'm 4 weeks into this. There's just no way this can't work because it's way too much.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to do 3 sets of 30 reps on the leg press and do the last 2 to true failure and expect that I'm going to keep this up. That's just not going to happen. They were doing this 3 times a week, this workout regime. These are newbies, right? These are elderly women too. So it's a different population. So you got to apply some little common sense to auto-regulate it. But absolutely what you said is a really, really smart way to know, okay, wow, I think I've got something here in changing my rep scheme to suit what I grow, how I grow best.
Yeah.
And the question that still is somewhat remaining is whether it was, if there was something about, so they didn't do, we don't know for sure on an individual basis whether those first 12 weeks had an impact on why the second 12 weeks were better for the most part. So was it simply changing the stimulus in some way? Did the first 12 weeks set up for the second 12 weeks for those low responders? I don't know, but we've got basically something that speaks really strongly to at least changing things up on a regular basis. So, like, one thing you can do, like I always kind of suggest, you can do DC training, you can do Fortitude training, you can do Meadows training, and those could each be 2 to 3 months at a run, and people find out which of those they grow best from. I've always kind of wondered, for instance, a lot of people will do like DC training and then John's training, right?
Okay.
DC heard this so many times from people who'd come to me having done those two before they did Fortitude Training, for instance.
Yeah.
Now I get a mix, and they're like, DC training got me strong, and then I was strong when I could do Meadows training,
which that makes sense.
Out of it. Yeah, which made sense. But then you go back after you've done Meadows training, you go back and you do Widowmakers, and like, because I've been used to doing John stuff,
Yeah,
all these challenge sets and stuff in the higher volume. So there's an interplay, and this is what periodization is all about, setting yourself up for the next phase in some way.
Yeah.
And this is what I built into Fortitude Training with the different set types sort of built in within the system. The loading sets make you stronger for the pump sets, and the pump sets give you better endurance for the loading sets. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
Vice versa.
We've got a question here. See if I can find it from Health, Wealth, and Life related to this. He says, isn't this time under tension also, Scott? What element does time under tension play in the way that this study was set up?
There is a difference. That's basically, we talked about, I think we called it effective time under tension.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good term.
It is. So this relates back to several things. There's so much there to kind of unpack. So when you're doing a high rep set, depending on the person, and how close to failure they can bring themselves, the time under tension is going to be greater. I mean, you pick up the sets are simply going to be longer. So there's tension right after you pick up the weight, but those lower loads, the tension isn't nearly as high, and you're going to spend more time during that set, which maybe isn't effective. How far you're willing to take the set is going to be dependent upon the person. So, and to what extent those reps at the end of the set that are quote unquote effective is going to depend on the person. So let's say two people who, for whatever reason, are psychologically the same. Their makeup is the same. So they, relative to their capabilities, they both push the set to the same relative true momentary muscular failure. They're equally motivated. And maybe if their life depended on it, they could both get 3 more reps, but they go and they get 27 instead of 30. It could be for one of those persons, for whatever reasons, could be numerous. And I think he mentioned muscle fiber type in there. That could be a possibility.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of literature showing, that higher rep training can be better for the type 1 fibers and vice versa. But it could very well be for those somewhat identical 27 rep sets to failure for each of them, that only the last 3 reps are effective, that have any impact. We can sort of lump it into that effective rep bucket. For one of those people, and for the other guy, he's getting 6 or 7 effective reps out of it.
Okay.
On the other hand, it could be that one person's 27 reps is a true failure, and the other person had 5 more reps in the tank. So the other person gets a lot more effective reps out of it simply for that reason, and both combinations of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is good. I like this study too, and it's easy for us to grasp. Super cool.
Yep.
We did have a few listener questions here, guys. And if everybody watching, we've got about 50 people watching right now. If you guys want to ask any questions, feel free to comment them. I highlighted a couple, so I'm going to go back and look at those right now. But we can definitely take some more. So guys, start posting them up. And thank you for watching live. And by the way, if you're not subscribed and you haven't hit the bell, then do that. A lot of you guys probably did hit the bell because that's how you knew that we were going live. This wasn't planned. We just decided last minute, hey, let's go do this at YouTube Live today.
On the edge.
Tanja had one. She says, I'm doing my first competition in October, finally after a decade of training. Trying to do it by myself. Oh, it was just a nice comment. Just with your book, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. Such a helpful, great book, worth every penny.
Awesome.
I thought it was a good comment, so I highlighted it to bring it back up. I didn't realize it wasn't a question.
I love it.
That's
I get
cool.
Comments that makes my day every time I get someone who's done that. Just congratulations.
Heck yeah. We had another guy, and he's here from Michigan. He messaged me the other day. And I meant to send it to you, actually. But he said he just bought your book, and he's getting ready for the Great Lakes Ironman in 5 weeks. And he said after that, I wanted to hire a coach. And he said, Scott, to me, I would reach out to you. I'd like to work with you, seeing how this thing goes for, to take it up a notch and probably do a national show, I'm thinking. But
okay, cool.
But he started out, and he's using your book right now. And he found it very valuable. Let's see.
Sweet.
So we had a gear question. We'll pull that one up in a minute. And we've got Gambone Law. He asks, great show. Thoughts on vitamins for recovery, preserving muscle. Upped my cardio, 280 minutes per week. Hit, list, row, ski, bike. Following a 4-day full body, 10 to 12 reps. I know it's a lot of cardio, and he's not chasing mass.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if he's talking about in vitamin infusions. People are doing a lot of that. We've talked a lot about like vitamin C, vitamin E, antioxidants, and those will diminish the free radical aspect of the stimulus of exercise. So, for instance, when it comes to cardio, if you do like what the studies have typically done, like I think 800 IUs of vitamin E, 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, and they'll be taken around a cardio workout, you'll prevent the insulin sensitivity that is a normal consequence of that type of aerobic training, and you'll prevent the mitochondrial biogenesis. So the aerobic adaptations in the skeletal muscle, at least, I don't know about cardiac muscle. It's probably been done like with an animal model, but at least I wouldn't be surprised if also in cardiac muscle, maybe to lesser extent cardiac muscle, so resilient. But you can prevent the aerobic adaptations in skeletal muscle with mega dosing of those vitamins. So if you're like wake up in the morning, I do my 1 gram of vitamin C and I do my vitamin E, and then I go do my morning cardio, you could be totally blunting those aerobic adaptations. So the idea in his context there, I know he's not chasing mass because he knows there's an interference effect potentially between aerobic and strength training.
Yeah.
But ideally, your aerobic training would then make it such that you can expend more calories at a lower intensity, a lower effort, because you get trained. So X speed on the treadmill or on the bike becomes easier once you get trained, and then you can just kind of cruise along. It's lesser effort, lesser interference with your strength and your muscle gains if you're going to get any in the gym. But if you blunt those aerobic adaptations, then you're not getting that adaptation, so your cardio doesn't become easier because you don't get trained, right? And you can also potentially blunt the hypertrophy as well at the same time.
Yeah.
And also, if let's say for legs, most cardio is leg based, if it's nice to have those aerobic cardiovascular adaptations for leg training in the gym, so that you can, if you're doing a Widowmaker, if someone going back to our first study who benefits from doing higher rep leg training.
Yeah.
As far as muscle growth, you can crank out those effective reps because you've reaped those endurance benefits from the cardiovascular training. You don't get gassed out doing your leg training. But if you're using high dose vitamin C, vitamin E, you can basically be shooting yourself in the foot altogether. So you could be missing out on a whole bunch of stuff. That's presuming the vitamin C, vitamin E story, which isn't far fetched. There's 1 gram vitamin C pills are easy to find. High dose vitamin E, easy to find.
Oh, yeah. What about solvents? I don't know if you have any thoughts on this stuff. CV asked us, he said, does Dr. Scott know much about gear solvents, glycol, BA, etc.? Lots of us shooting a fair bit of this stuff, and I worry as it isn't used IM in humans.
That's probably a question for Vigorous Steve. This is his thing, man.
Yeah, he's done his own like studies basically on himself, where he's used products and then done his blood work and then seen higher inflammation markers from using, some of these various super solvents as we've seemed to have termed them lately.
Glycol.
Yeah. Glycol could be a really nasty one. EO, I'd put that right up there as well.
Yeah. And the thing is, not that I'm suggesting people do it this way, but if you know you can get the powder, the actual steroid itself, and I mean, the instructions have been around for decades. You can get it from if you're going underground, you're already committed to this. Yeah, you produce your own stuff, and I believe you can get like BA, you can whatever solvent you'd want to use.
Yes.
Online from online companies that are legit. They're not going to sell you pump benzyl alcohol or whatever. And then at least right, what's going on. The unknown would be, potential contaminants in the steroid powder itself.
Yes.
But you can at least know, like, because I mean, the story that I understand is, sometimes the case you like, I got this stuff, like even when I'm using, you probably heard this a million times because you talk about, you got drugs and stuff, you guys talk about this continuously, but you got someone who's using the same source and all of a sudden they get a new batch of whatever and it just like cripples them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happened? Right. Well, you're not in control of that. You don't know what they did. They may have just run out of BA and they're like, I got 15 guys who are waiting on their 400 milligram per mil super test or whatever,
right?
And like, so they just put some of that in there to fill the orders. So you don't have a clue, right? And the thing that's unfortunate is beggars can't be choosers in this case to some degree. Like this is, you can't go knocking on doors saying, hey, do you happen to have an extra bottle of testosterone lying around? So you kind of have to get whatever you can get. And that's a bad place to be in when it comes to your health and what you're injecting into yourself. Because it's kind of a one-way street. Once it's in, there's no like, oh, I don't think I want that. I'm going to can't suck it out of the depot.
Yeah. I think some of the issues I had years back were due to solvents. I had a brand that I always used, and basically I had a pretty good setup where I wouldn't say I was a promoter or advertiser of, but we'll call me a sponsored athlete, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so basically everything I ran, I wasn't paying for, and I started developing these stomach issues, and I think there were a lot of factors, but then I started noticing that about 2 out of 4 times, maybe 3 out of 5 times when I took a shot, I would get almost like the tren cough feeling. It didn't have to be tren, it could be any compound. But 3 out of 5 times I'd get kind of like a burning in my throat and I might cough a little bit. And 2 hours later, it took me a year to figure this out, because then I'd go back to my day, everything is fine. And I'd continue eating, I'd go train, whatever. And then a few hours later that day, and it took me a long time to connect it, I would start getting this sharp stomach pain. To the point where I went and got I got ultrasounds done. I went and got a CT scan on all my organs. And I think that it was the solvents, because it finally dawned on me later in an off season. Because my stomach pain went away post-contest. I'm also not using as much gear, right? And then as I started pushing up, it made the connection. And I think it had to do with some of the super solvents in there. So I've been a fan of just like try to find a good quality product that I trust, and hopefully, they're going to be consistent. I don't go around to getting this and that and trying different brands. It's like I find one thing that has worked well. And I found, and this is kind of a side topic, Scott, MCT oil tends to be really good for me. Like my body processes it really well. Interestingly, I remember
it without a problem, right?
You what?
You could drink it without a problem. That's sort of a nice sign. MCT oil is,
Yeah. And it tends to be really thin, and there's very little pain, all of that. So that's kind of been my jam. And just kind of like, this is way off topic, but I thought it could be maybe fun to talk about for a minute. Do you remember, Scott, when we did a podcast about the half-lives of different esters and how they may be very different than the half-lives that we see like listed on the message boards and, in the articles that we see on like steroid boards and stuff like that. Yeah. So half-lives can be radically different. Like test sip, if I recall, was possibly as low as like 3 days for one guy in a study, wasn't it?
All over the place. Yeah. Where it's injected, there's, if you go in the delt or the glute, it'll differ. Yeah. If you exercise that muscle afterwards, or you're just sitting on that muscle, let's say like, I don't know, let's say you work for Amazon, right? And you're delivering stuff and you inject your glute and you're getting in and out of your seat all the time. And you got a big step. You always use that leg, or maybe you avoid using it because it's so sore, but you're stepping up, so you're constantly using those muscles. That's going to squeeze that depot around. It's going to mechanically dissipate it from the muscle where it's been injected, which is one way you can get out of there. The thing I was going to say that's important, I think.
Oh, and I was just going to add, though, to that,
please.
The one thing then where I'm tying that together is MCT being very thin.
Right.
Also could be another factor, right? Because it was in that same conversation. Yeah, carrier oil could speed up the release of a long-acting compound. Yeah. I was fascinated by that, but please carry on. What were you going to say?
Well, I'll go back to what I was going to say too. But the thing is, like, we can measure testosterone, but you can't like go to, Quest Labs and get a lab to see, what's my nandrolone level, what's my boldenone level, what are my levels. So you can't really even do a half-life test on those things to see where they're at, So and it could be all over the place. So you just kind of you're totally shooting in the dark. The thing that like related to this original question though that I think it's important to note is that, like you said, like with the toxicity, like let's say, I mean, there's obvious things like, you know, anadrol that might screw up your appetite and make it difficult to get the food in that you need to grow. I've just this general sense I have, you're not going to see this directly studied. It would be sort of unethical to do this, but there's a point of diminishing returns that may not be related to the dose response that theoretically would be in place based on the gear versus how much growth you could get from it. That's because of the side effects that come from the additives, the things we're talking about. So let's say, you know, theoretically, you know, you would grow better on 2 grams versus 1 gram, right? But it might be that when you go to 2 grams, the toxicity that you as an individual experience from everything in whatever it is that you're injecting, which you may not even know exactly, is such that 1 gram's your cutoff, because the law of diminishing returns goes downwards.
Yeah.
Because the side effects on the toxicity interfere with any gains you're going to get, because you can't eat, because you don't train very well, because you're just simply toxic.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on there. Like one of the things I'm looking into here is IGF-1.
Yes.
I'm eventually going to decide I'm going to do sort of an overview on IGF-1, the somatomedin hypothesis, and some kind of cool stuff related to that for John Meadows' site.
Okay, awesome.
But, you know, IGF-1, one thing I can say is it's a general marker for nutritional status.
Really?
Right? So people who, that's why it's something that can increase when you're overeating, or for instance, like one of the tests for GH level is IGF-1. Obviously, people inject GH and they expect their IGF-1 to be higher, right? But you can also have lowered IGF-1 simply by dieting. So, like back in the day, guys who wanted to get a prescription for GH, you could just diet yourself down to, you know, close to contest levels, and your negative calorie balance, negative energy balance, and your IGF-1 levels will be really, really low.
Yeah.
And it's not because you don't have high GH. You probably have high GH because GH levels are helping with fat oxidation. It's because your nutritional status is so poor. So IGF-1 is something that, you know, in the somatomedin hypothesis comes from the liver. If your liver's toxed out, you're not going to have very much IGF-1. So to whatever extent that is mediating muscle growth, you could be totally shooting yourself in the foot if you've got orals and high levels of injectables with a bunch of solvents and other things in there that you don't metabolize very well, that tox your body out. So your best growth place could be very, 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 very low doses.
Yeah,
right?
And that makes total sense, because if you can stay healthy and feel good, I mean, honestly,
Absolutely.
man, I think that's the foundation. Is a healthy body is going to do what we want. I mentioned this the other day. I feel like when I first got into bodybuilding, my thought was that what we did was force our bodies to do our will. You know what I mean? Like you force it,
command
you corral it. Yeah, command your body to grow. And in reality, it's a matter of like trying to coax your body to want to do those things. And the way that we can do that best is by being as healthy as possible, really.
Yeah. Give it a good reason to comply rather than force it to do something it's just not equipped to, because it's toxic. It doesn't have the resources.
What about this one? We got one here that's pretty good. Sam says, "Hey guys, I have a question about fat loss for natural guys. This would apply to guys on gear too, I'm sure. I'm around 190 pounds, 15% body fat at 5'9", and I want to do a cut. Would it be better to do an 8-week cut or a much longer 16-week cut?" So I'm assuming he means like push it hard for 8 weeks and get there versus, diet a little slower for 16.
Yeah, it's highly variable. You can push pretty hard and hold on to fat-free mass. Depends on how trained you are, how much that muscle mass is, the result of many, many years. And the best pros, the best natural guys, their diet is usually, those guys go 6 months, easy. Some will go 9 months. The natties diet much longer because they don't have the PEDs to help them hold on to muscle mass.
Yeah.
So that's the way to go to be optimal if you wanted to go on stage. But if it's like, hey, it's July, and by the time I get, the summer's going to, bathing suit season's going to be over, beach season is going to be gone, and I want to be in shape, at least so I can enjoy it a little bit, then 8 weeks might be better suited. And 15%, depends what that 15% looks like on him and where he wants to go with it, If he wants to get to 4%, 8 weeks is not going to cut it, But if he wants to, a pound a week, that whole general thing, that makes sense. You can do that for 8 weeks and then see if he's satisfied.
Yeah.
But you can, I mean, kind of depends on what you want to look like. You can drop a lot of fat, and he's 190 pounds, he's 15%. He might be like, man, I'm so small. But if he lives in a warm state where he can wear a tank top and be shredded, it's great. But if he's working, a business job where he's got to wear, a button-down shirt and long sleeves the whole time, and the only times he really sees himself is when he's in the gym. And even if he goes out, it looks like on the weekends, it looks kind of weird. He's wearing a tank top everywhere. It's like, look at the meathead over there.
Yeah.
It may not suit whatever his goal is in terms of aesthetics. So kind of all depends on what you're wanting out of the cut as to how long you're going to make it happen.
That's a good point. Let me ask you this. So, and we've looked into body fat before. I've seen your DEXA scan readings. We've brought the pictures up. You've talked about how different body fat calibers work and stuff. So if he's 15% at 195, I think he said, that's 28.5 total pounds of fat. How much of that, let's say he decided like, I'm going to get peeled. How much of that could an average human get rid of? Because I know there's some of that fat is going to be like in your brain, right? Like some of that fat we can't get rid of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there was a guy, he didn't start at 15%, but there was a guy who fasted for like a year.
Okay.
He just did electrolytes and water. He was like 400 pounds and like that. And he went down to 190.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, an interesting thing enough about that guy didn't have any loose skin at the end of it.
Really?
Because he was, my thought is that he was catabolizing the protein in his skin for energy, right? He's got to get protein somewhere. So he was, the thing that I think can work against someone who wants to hold muscle mass is you want to hold protein so you have higher protein. And that spares protein catabolism, but it does it in the muscle and other protein sources, which would be your skin. So the collagen and the connective tissue proteins in your skin. But so, I mean, if he just like, not suggesting that he just go on a fast, like a total fast, but people do like protein and veggies and they go for it. And that's, but you're going to lose a ton of muscle. This is the case, like what they've done, like Stu Phillips has a study, I think what they go with like 3.6 grams per kilogram protein for like 4 weeks. And these were untrained women and they actually gained muscle mass.
Oh,
in the course of the study.
Yeah.
So that can actually happen. So like theoretically, like you can go to tremendous extremes, if your life depended upon it, like let's say you're in some sort of, crazy scenario where your whole family's been taken ransom and they say you need to drop 10 pounds of body fat in the next 2 weeks. Well, you could do it.
Yeah.
You just start walking, as long as you have water and the electrolytes that are needed and vitamins, and you can eat nothing. Ascetic monks have done that, for centuries.
Yeah.
Right. Just go out in the jungle and you start hallucinating. Right. You're running on ketones and the whole thing, and you come back and you look like Gandhi, typically as he was portrayed in the movie.
Right.
So, but that's not what he's looking for. Right. And that's not a way to live. And you can't concentrate during your day. You can't exist like that in a normal situation. If you have relationships that you want to maintain, you come in smelling like acetone, right, and your face is just a total zombie. It's not gonna work. So it's always about figuring out what this is all about, trying to improve our quality of life in some way, shape, or form. So enjoying the process, which can mean that you're enjoying the grind as well.
Right.
So it may be like, you know what, I'm gonna go for this. I'm taking this. 8 weeks. I'm gonna just blow everyone's minds with this massive transmogrification, right? It's gonna just be out of this world, and you just put the pedal to the metal and you make it happen. And even as a natural, you can kind of do that. Like you diet, you don't miss a meal, your protein's high, you do everything you possibly can, and you sort of say, you know what, I'm hungry. This is good. I want to be hungry. That means that I'm dropping fat.
Yeah.
A rule that I used to kind of have, which can be everything can be taken out of context and too far, is that when I was sort of in the peak of a diet, if I'm not hungry, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Basically, even kind of after a meal, and then sort of in the peak of the off season, if I'm hungry, there's something wrong.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like you never really want to eat those meals. They're just on the meal plan because that's the amount of food that you've worked up to that you need to be eating in order to continue the progress. So every
Yeah.
once in a while, it's like, oh, I get to be hungry. I'm going to skip a meal, so I'll have a meal that I actually enjoy eating to
Yeah.
some degree. So, and everything in between. So you can, be very, very like I want to pick an 8-week diet that I can where I feel like I'm dieting and I'm dieting, but my wife doesn't know I'm dieting. No one asked that I'm dieting. Like it doesn't bother me. I don't have low energy levels, and I
Right.
cut some fat, and it's noticeable. It's reasonable. To I'm going to go for the gusto. I'm going to see if I can get into 3 weeks out from show shape in 8 weeks.
You
And
mentioned. I was gonna say you mentioned a study. I think it was of women that were given was it amino acids or protein, and that they
their
gained
protein
muscle.
levels were like yeah, they actually they were newbies. They hadn't trained previously. They're previously untrained, but
Yeah.
yeah, that can happen.
Check
It's a
this out.
recomp.
I just
Mm-hmm.
showed this to Ron and Dusty, I think a couple weeks ago, and I had it on my desktop because I just showed it to a client yesterday, and it's an example I've been telling people because I'll get a question like, "Hey, for instance, this guy who messaged me yesterday, he's a client of mine, like general average guy composition, okay, and
Mm-hmm.
his goal coming to me is to be a better bodybuilder. He wants to first lose fat, get into good shape. He asked me, "Can you tell me what percent?" Yesterday he asked me, and he's down a decent amount now, and Eddie still has a decent amount of fat to go. He's eating high carbs still, and he's still losing it at least 2 pounds, about 2 pounds per week. So
Awesome.
he's in great position to keep going. And my thought to him was, man, your body's doing fantastic. We're eating plenty of carbs still. We're eating a lot of food. He's got protein 5-6 times a day. I say we just keep doing this until it doesn't make sense to anymore. At some point, it's going to
Absolutely.
get harder. At some point, it's like, well, do we really need to get you leaner? Then from there, let's turn it around. But I said to him, I think you're still gaining muscle in a deficit right now. And this was the example. A client of mine sent this to me. This is from several years ago. Now, keep in mind, this guy, Vache, is natural, okay? Men's physique competitor. The left picture is the start of the diet. The right picture is shortly after the diet, after he's kind of like screwed off for a little while and just filled back out. Maybe it was 5 weeks, okay? So this is, and he's a natural guy. He has to
Look at his
diet
face,
hard.
dude.
Went to keto.
Yeah, baby.
This is a keto diet, and in the course of, at the time, I'm going to guess I probably did a 16-week diet with him based off of when this was taken. That's about the time frame I would have done with him. He definitely grew muscle in a deficit, in not to mention being natural. So any of our guys that are listening that are on gear, like there's no question in my mind, they're definitely still able to grow muscle to an extent, and especially factors like he does. Vache isn't a huge guy. He had plenty of room to still grow. And I think there's a lot of factors to it. But I wanted to share that with you and share it with our audience too, because it's a huge change considering he was in a deficit.
I'd refer people to Chris Bearcat, who's been on our podcast here.
Yes,
And
yeah.
he did several. He did Steve Hall's podcast about this topic about a year ago. It was kind of a big deal. People were kind of coming at him because he authored a paper. He was the first author on a review paper, and he's seen this in the data they've collected at the University of Tampa. There are many people who recomp like that during their training programs. It's not an totally unheard of phenomenon, especially when you're a newbie, to gain muscle and lose body fat at the same time. There are studies dating back like in the 1950s from PE classes where they just took PE students, and these are body composition studies where they're just first assessing, how do we assess body fat? And they're just starting jogging programs. These are previously untrained students, college students, and they just start them on running programs. They're not even lifting weights, and they can gain fat-free mass and lose body fat just from starting exercising. There are studies with Army Rangers, are some of the most impressive ones I've seen, where they measure their body fat before and after their boot camp, whatever it is that they call it. I can't remember. There may be a SEAL training, but I remember Army Rangers. I think there's 2 studies that I recall that are out there, and they're gaining like 10, 12 pounds of muscle, and they're dropping like 18 pounds of fat on average.
Wow.
Like they're just totally metamorphosizing. Yeah. So it's a totally, and I mean, those guys, I mean, sometimes like I've heard stories, I've talked to guys, people have asked me about this. Like there is PED use, of course, in the military.
Sure.
It's kind of it's a thing like, that's a whole other topic. It would be great to maybe bring someone on who's got more insight into this than I do. But you want to be careful. Like I've talked to guys before. Like say, can you help me figure this out? They're gonna go to become a Navy SEAL or what have you, and they've gotten the best shape they possibly can, and they want to have as much muscle mass as they can. So they've gotten a little extra help from some stuff, and then they're like, well, but I'm gonna fucking crash. 10 weeks in because I can't get my gear. And in some cases they figured out ways to do that. So some of these studies are old enough that I think that probably wasn't what was happening. But in those Army Ranger studies, they're doing stuff like, okay, like go out in the woods. You got 10 weeks. These are the things you got to do. Like build a fort here, and we're going to come try to kill you here this time. And you just have to forage, figure out something to eat. You got a bow and an arrow or whatever, your gun. You're going to have to cook a deer now and again, and they have to live off the land.
Yeah.
And they're hiking around all over the place, and they have tremendous changes in body composition, fat gain or fat loss and muscle gain simultaneously, basically. So it's totally possible. That's awesome what he did. I said, look at his face, like he's so happy. Like his posture was changed. He was like, yeah,
yeah,
yep. Like he's got that, like it's just like Jordan Peterson is renowned for having spoken about lobsters and how lobsters' posture changes when they've been defeated or not. You've heard this?
Oh, no, I haven't.
Talk about? Yeah, you can look up just Jordan Peterson lobster. And when lobsters have, I'm totally bastardizing the phenomenon.
Sure.
And it happens with dogs too, of course. But your posture, and Cesar Millan does it with the dogs. Like if you have a dog that's like kind of scared, it'll tuck its tail,
Yeah, absolutely.
And we as humans, we kind of like, oh, okay. We tuck our tails in our body posture.
Yeah.
But you can but the mind will follow the body as well as the body following the mind. So if you just stand up straight, this is what Peterson was like, stand up straight, then you'll act like you're standing up straight.
I like that, man. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And in his case, he's standing up straight. He's like, yeah, I just got something done, baby. Yeah. You can see it in the way, he's posing. You can see his delts activated because he's kind of doing a front relax there from the side. Like you can see he's holding himself differently, but his posture, his facial expression is totally transformed. That's because his mindset transformed while he transformed his body. And that's what I think is what's really, really cool about bodybuilding at its root, is that it's not just a pure physical phenomenon. It's body, mind, spirit, to use that sort of trite expression, but it's all rolled into one. If you're doing it right, at least in my mind.
Let's see. We'll have to wrap this thing up pretty quick here. We're past an hour now, Scott. But let's see if we can pull in one more here. I know that Tim was waiting on us. And sorry, guys, we couldn't get to everything. Tim says, what rate of body weight gain for an enhanced bodybuilder do you think should have post-show to get back to your pre-prep weight? And what rate do you think you should shoot for after that?
Wow, I wish there could be just simple one-word answers to that. So leave it up for a second because I can kind of break this down. So after show, the first thing is restoration of water for many people. So you may have to just get some water on. I just did, for those who are interested, I just put out a thing. It just got posted on John Meadows' site. Post-show reverse supplementation after a show. So the other side of reverse dieting after a show. So the rate of return to pre-prep weight will depend upon how the prep went and what happened to your body composition during it, right? And as well, whether you're a natural or you're an enhanced competitor, and whether you're staying on some amount of enhancements. Yeah. So the typical sort of smart thing to do if you're enhanced, and I can kind of presume most people here are, not everybody, I'll address everything, both sides, is, you're not going to keep your orals in that you had in for 6 weeks before your show. You take those out, but you might maintain some form of enhancement, right? So that if you did lose some muscle mass, that can come back fairly rapidly in the next 6 or 8 weeks, or 4 to 8 weeks, let's say, in someone who may have lost some size. Mm-hmm. Now, if you didn't lose any muscle mass, right, and you did a really nice job of dieting down, once you've got your water weight back into place and you've kind of come out of the hole, sometimes you can be in this spot where you're so dieted down. This is especially bad if people have been on stimulants, fat burners that have suppressed their appetite. Like, okay, and I'm going to drop everything all at once, and like now your appetite is just sky high.
Yeah.
And you want to, you're wanting to eat everything you can see. Backing out of all those things makes sense. If obviously you want to take care of your health, don't just stay on clean for the next 3 months for your appetite, for the appetite suppression effects. But be kind to yourself too, because otherwise, as you know, you can just eat yourself right back into a higher body fat level, lickety split, if you just let yourself go. So if you're in a situation where you kept your muscle mass and you've gotten out of that hole, which might mean like getting yourself to 6, 7, 8% body fat, so you're just not entirely food focused, then you can go really, really slow because you got that muscle mass back already. So you putting on a pound, you could be 6 weeks back, and now let's say you're at 10% body fat, same amount of muscle mass because you've got some body composition estimate. Your strength levels will tell you something at that point. You can do a DEXA, as I kind of talk about, or maybe you've done skin folds and like, okay, my body weight's back to 220. My skin fold total was 40 when I was at 220 when I started, but now my skin fold is only 20 at 220. So I've got much less body fat. There's no reason to just like go hog wild. You got muscle mass, and now you can eat slowly because you only gain muscle mass at a certain rate. You're at a certain P ratio you can gain. So the pound a week type of thing makes sense. And that's when you would just sort of scale things back. So, but if you're someone who, lost a bunch of muscle mass, you're going to expect, so this is sort of the flip side of the law of diminishing returns, that muscle mass will come back more rapidly with muscle memory, right? So, like, I keep on forgetting the guy who you had on the show who was like hit 300 because he had to, and then by the time he dieted down, he was at 220.
Oh,
right?
Gary Turner.
Gary Turner, right? Or you're someone who did something like that, and now you lost a lot of muscle mass, right? Like you tried to just diet yourself too rapidly. You're going to expect more rapid gains in body weight because you're going to you should have a pretty good P ratio, unless you've just thrown all your PEDs out that may have been involved. Like unless you just go crazy with backing out supplement wise and food wise, you can expect some more rapid rate of muscle gain because you've got muscle memory helping with you getting back to where you once were. Yeah. I like to use, if you're not doing body composition, you can use your strength levels. A lot of people who have done that and lost a bunch of size, like one of the things they might do is like, I have to burn more fat, right? So they up their reps to try to expend energy during their weight training sessions, which it's not really a good idea. That's not the best way to drop body fat in my mind. You don't create much of a caloric deficit with weight training in general. So you can expect more rapid weight gain there, but you have to be careful. So it depends. The main thing to kind of watch, and this is if people can find, maybe they can Google Minnesota starvation study.
Oh yeah.
We've talked about that here on the show. Is that there seems to be a lipostat and sort of a musculostat or a fat. So getting both your body fat back to where it might be is important for regulating your appetite as well as getting your fat-free mass. And one thing that you can glean from that study, which didn't involve training, is that the way that study was conducted, individuals at one point were allowed to free feed, and what they did when they free fed was it appeared from the data that they ate themselves back to their original fat-free mass level. But what happened, because they were just free feeding, like they held them off for a little while after the starvation period. Yeah. Like, okay, they're just going to keep you under control, and they said, okay, go for it. And they kept eating in excess until they got their fat-free mass, muscle mass back. But because they did it so rapidly, they just piled. The fat-free mass can only return so quickly, but fat mass can pile on really, really rapidly. Yeah. They ate themselves they yo-yoed basically back up to higher levels of body fat. So you got to watch for that. So you got to find a happy medium. So knowing your fat-free mass and where that is, whether you lost it during the prep and how it's coming back, strength, body composition will give you an idea. The mirror course too, but it's hard because your head's all screwed up, man. That's why he's wanting to know this. I think you can't really say, because you're losing what you just worked so hard for. The mirror is just like telling you, like, I'm looking worse and worse and worse sometimes. So you just kind of got to look at getting the water back so you fill out, and then look at your fat-free mass when you've got equal hydration status, and use that to guide your weight gain. And if you're gaining really rapidly and your fat-free mass is still lacking, then probably that's fat. If you gain your fat-free mass back already and your body fat's low, that's an awesome position to be in. Take it easy. You're going rapidly, and probably the faster you try to accelerate things, the more fat you're going to gain relative to the muscle that you're gaining as you continue forward. So it's very much an individual thing, I think.
That makes sense. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody who's hung out with us live here. I saw Kuba was here with us for a minute. I don't know if he's still watching, but Kuba was watching at the beginning of the show. I know this is probably like toward the tail end of their workout, so they were probably just getting done with their training and getting their food in and stuff. You heading back to hang out with your German people today at all, or what are you doing?
In a half an hour, there is actually another meetup that I can do, another group. So I might have a little bit of lunch, and then I might do that.
Awesome. Well, like I said, appreciate you guys tuning in. Of course, you can go to byobbcoach.com and you can get Scott's book. Or you can go to Amazon and get the hardcover, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. It'll literally take you through your off season. Actually, it'll help you create a plan for your off season, then carry out your contest prep, figure out how to peak, take you all the way into the show and your rebound. It literally covers everything. So if you want to do things yourself, you can be your own bodybuilding coach. And you like when I did that, Scott? That was like a good little good little ad.
That was very nice.
And check out TrueNutrition.com, our title sponsor. Guys, they have supported our shows like long before anybody else even knew who we were. So thank you very much, True Nutrition. You guys are awesome. Use our code THINK there. They've got high quality supplements that Scott and I both 100% trust. Dante puts in the bag what he says he's going to put in the bag. There's no BS there whatsoever. Let me know if you have any questions about them. Supplementsource.ca for our Canadians. You guys can get great deals over there. They have deals that change week to week, like overstock, label changes, short dated, stuff like that. Amino Asylum, use our code THINK. You get all sorts of goodies over there. You guys know all about them. I can't give you the actual website on YouTube, but definitely check them out. Strom Sports Nutrition for those of you in the UK. And, I'll put our Instagrams below. Definitely follow Scott because he's always coming up with something cool. Scott, anything else you want to add?
I just heard vielen Dank für den Livestream. Vielen Dank für diejenigen, die zugehört haben. Es war eine Freude. That means thanks for watching. It was really nice. And that's lovely. It. Bis zum nächsten Mal.